Hi everyone, it's Melissa, and today I am doing the Eclectic Reader Tag. I was tagged by Olivia's Catastrophe. I will leave her version of this, which was the tag, but also just some general discussion of how she approaches reading as an eclectic reader. And the original is by Cozy Reader Kelly, and I will leave that video linked below as well. So number one is, where do you get your book recommendations? I almost exclusively, I would say, get my book recommendations from BookTube. I feel like the booktubers I watch and that I interact with, like, you get to know their specific tastes and where they align with yours and where they don't, and it's just, I feel like the best way for me to figure out if I'm going to like something or not. In my own personal life, I don't really, like, this might sound bad, take much stock in what people suggest to me to read, because they're just suggesting it because they read it, like, hey, this is a great book, read it, without really knowing my tastes. Whereas I feel like people who comment on a video suggesting something to me will suggest it because I've mentioned another book that's similar. It'll be in response to something I've said in the video, or I will be seeking out my own recommendations by watching videos and then deciding if how they're describing a book appeals to me. So yeah, almost exclusively BookTube, Instagram as well, but primarily BookTube is where I get my recommendations. Number two is, how do you decide what to read next? Well, this has changed very recently. If you saw one of my, I think it might have been my very last video, where I was talking about how I haven't been doing TBRs, but up until this year, for the last, I don't know, couple years, I have been very much a planner, setting a TBR for the month and then sticking to it. And how I would plan would be based on kind of like what's going on in the book community, right? So if there's a readathon, I'll pick books to fit those prompts. If there's a month where people are trying to read like a certain genre, or things like Asian readathon, or things like Aussie April, or, you know, those kinds of like themed months. But this year, I just, something, I don't know, switched in my brain. I don't know what's going on, but I haven't been setting TBRs. I've been reading via my mood, which is something I hadn't really done previously. So now that I am off TBRs, at least for the time being, how am I picking up or choosing what to read next? I'm still participating in read-alongs and readathons and picking things up for that. But by and large, it's just, I'm just scanning my shelves and thinking, oh yeah, you know, I'm in the mood for this genre, or I'm in the mood for something, you know, serious or hard-hitting right now, or I'm in the mood for something a little fluffier. And I'll scan my shelves, or I'll kind of scroll through audiobooks that I've downloaded and haven't listened to yet. And that's how I've been choosing what to read lately. It's been based on mostly mood and a little bit on like readathons and stuff, and like seasonally too. I feel like I was in the mood for like wintry books and stuff lately. Number three, how have your reading tastes changed over time? I've always been an eclectic reader, so I don't think that even as a child that I was zoned in on one type of book and that's all I read. I think I've always read a variety of different types of books, so I don't think that's necessarily changed. I think mostly I've been exposed to more. So in like high school and university, you're exposed to books, especially in high school, you're exposed to books by like reading lists or things you're getting assigned, or, you know, you're in your English class and you're assigned a book and now, oh, I'm really interested in that author. So I was exposed to books that way. Also, I have two older brothers and I would kind of read from their shelves growing up and got exposed to a couple of authors that way. But there was a different time. Like, we didn't have internet. I mean, we had internet by the time I was in high school, but like, there weren't really ways to learn about new books. I would only really get exposed to like the most popular, you know, quote unquote canon, right? The things that everyone knows about. Whereas now I'm exposed to everything and anything that I want to read, and it's just kind of expanded my horizons. So I think I've always been an eclectic reader, but now I'm exploring like more authors and more topics and more genres and more things that I just didn't have access to. So that's kind of a bit of a non-answer because I don't think my taste so much has changed. I mean, I think just in terms of growing up, there are certain things like, I don't know, misogyny or things you see in books that maybe I wouldn't have noticed so much that stand out to me more now. But aside from that, in terms of like the types of books I'm picking up, just a wider array, I think, of authors and genres. Number 4 is, what genres / subgenres do you never or usually never read? I will read pretty much anything. There are definitely lots of subgenres I haven't had a chance to read yet. But there are a couple of things I just haven't read yet. It's not because I'm like opposed to reading it. I just haven't yet. So actually the only like main genre I can think of that I haven't read yet is Western. I feel like most of the other major genres, I think I've read all of the other major genres. Subgenres, like I said, there's probably tons I haven't read. I don't really tend to read YA contemporary. I read some YA now and then, but it generally isn't contemporary. But it's not like I would never read it. I don't read a ton of romance, but I do read romance occasionally. So I'd say YA contemporary and romance are my least read. I'm more picky about my romance, I've realized. And I've never read Western, but I would be happy to. And the last question is, what are 5 specific subgenres you enjoy? I include a recommendation or 2 for each one. So I've chosen subgenres. I don't know how specific these are because I've only gotten back into reading the last like 2.5, 3 years. So I haven't had a lot of time to really delve into those like extra specific, like very niche subgenres. So I'm using kind of like broader categories like speculative fiction as like a genre, or like nonfiction as a genre, and then like choosing some things that are subgenres of those major ones. To you, these might not be subgenres, but I think technically speaking they are. So for the first one, I have graphic memoir. So I love memoir in general, but specifically graphic memoir really works for me. I like the combination of like the author telling the story through words and like reading their innermost thoughts mixed with seeing what they're seeing, kind of like seeing into their memories. And I like that combination. So if I was going to recommend graphic memoir, I'm going to recommend 2 that I really, really enjoyed. The first one is Dancing at the Pity Party by Tyler Fetter. So this is a memoir about grief when Tyler Fetter lost her mom when she was 19 or 20 years old. And I just thought it was a really great tribute to her mom, and also an exploration of like how she had to process her grief and what that journey looked like. And I thought it just beautifully articulated things that are really hard to articulate. And the other graphic memoir that I really enjoyed was They Called Us Enemy by, his name is escaping me, George Takei. So this is, it's a memoir and partly a little bit of history about the Japanese internment camps in the US, and George Takei talks about when his family were forced to leave their home and were sent off to one of these camps, and it also gives a little bit of like historical context and that kind of stuff. But yeah, I thought it was really well done, and it had a good mixture of his unique perspective, what his family went through, and that kind of like intimacy in getting a lens into their experience and their lives, mixed with some of the history of what was happening globally and with the war and anti-Asian, specifically anti-Japanese sentiment and policy and all that kind of stuff. So my second subgenre is Gothic. I am a really big reader of atmosphere and setting. Those things I think are just really important to my reading experience, and books that I really love tend to do atmosphere really well. Gothic books, they got this down. They know how to set a scene. They know about atmosphere. And also I love kind of like that uneasy, like spooky, eerie type of vibe in books generally. And so yeah, Gothic just really speaks to me. And I think I'm just gonna have to go with a classic, with Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. I just really liked that haunting feeling and getting into the character's head and her struggle with finding her own place and her own identity, and feeling her husband's late wife was still present and like she couldn't shake Rebecca. And it was just this kind of like non-ghostly kind of haunting. Like her memory was just in the air, and I loved that feeling. For my third genre, I have science fiction in general, but specifically I like science fiction that talks about like really big ideas. I like science fiction that explores like human nature, humanity, what it means to be human, anything vaguely existential, I am all over. So I like science fiction that deals with artificial intelligence. I like science fiction that talks about predestination versus like free will. I like those kind of like big, almost like philosophical type of science fiction books. And for this, I am going to recommend Exhalation by Ted Chiang. It's a short story collection. There's a lot in here that deals with existential stuff like mortality and the inevitability of like non-existence, and predestination is in there, artificial intelligence is in there, religion is in there. Every single topic that I find interesting in science fiction is in that collection, so I would highly recommend it. For my fourth genre, my fourth and fifth, I think people usually conflate, but they are distinct and separate genres. So my fourth and fifth are dystopian and apocalyptic or post-apocalyptic. I like kind of scary, unsettling stuff in books. And what's more scary or unsettling than living in a dystopian society or living in a post-apocalyptic world? So I like looking at how characters deal with these just horrendous environments. For dystopian, I'm going to mention two. So I think it was last year I read Never Let Me Go, and I loved how that book, while it was set in a dystopian society, that's really not the focus of the book. I don't want to give things away, but it's very much based on acceptance of your lot in life, I guess, or acceptance of your life and mortality. And also it really played with memory and looking back, and I just thought it was just very haunting. And another dystopian that doesn't really get talked about is The Long Walk by Stephen King. Now, I haven't read this in a long time. I've read it multiple times and I love it every time, but I haven't read it since I was a teenager, I think. I used to read it like every single year. I loved it so much. So maybe I'm due for a reread, but The Long Walk is a dystopian where 100 young men, ages of like, I don't know, late teens to early 20s maybe, enter a competition where you walk for days on end and there's only one survivor. And it really examines the characters in this. It's not a race. It's an endurance race, I suppose, but it really examines like the relationships they build with each other. They don't want their newfound friends to die, but they also want them to die because only through their deaths can they survive. I love that kind of stuff, and I would recommend it with the caveat that I haven't read it in a long time, so maybe I'll reread it and let you know if it holds up or not. And my fifth genre, like I mentioned, is apocalyptic or post-apocalyptic fiction. And I am going to recommend two for this category as well. I am going to recommend Moon of the Crusted Snow by Waubgeshig Rice. This is set in a remote northern indigenous community, and they don't know what's happened. Something's happened. They've lost communication. Their sat phones aren't working. Their power has just gone off. They can't access the internet. Like, everything's down. And they're remote. They can't contact the outside world. They don't know what's happened. And winter is going to be starting soon, and they're kind of on their own. And then things really get rolling when people from the south, more southern than what they are, arrive via like snowmobiles or ATVs or something, and they want to stay there. They want protection and security, and there's a lot going on about kind of like colonialism. I also want to recommend Severance by Ling Ma. I loved this book. It's an apocalyptic zombie novel that's really not about zombies. I'm not going to go into it because I have a whole separate review if you're interested. If you don't think you would like a zombie novel, like, this is not really about zombies. It's about like severance from not even just the world, but like from family and your past. The main character, Candace, is the daughter of immigrants, and she is disconnected from her past after her parents die. And yeah, there's just all of these like severed connections in many different ways throughout the book. And I'll stop talking about it because I have a whole review, like I said. But yeah, it really, whether or not you like zombies is, I think, beside the point with this book. I think it was just an excellent look at like human connection. So those are some of my favorite subgenres. I think this tag has been going around a while, and I'm not sure who's done it, but I'm going to tag a couple of people who may or may not have done it. I don't think they have. I'm going to tag Berna from Berna's Bookish Adventures, because she reads, I feel like, just a wide assortment of books. And I am also going to tag Kevvie from Kevvie, because similarly, I feel like in all of Kevvie's wrap-ups, she's read like across a smattering of genres and types of books. And if you are also an eclectic reader and haven't had a chance to do the tag yet, I tag you as well. As always, thank you all so much for watching, and we'll chat soon. Take care. Bye.